Right then, good morning everybody. Hope you're all well and enjoying the sunny weather. We are about to hold our webinar on the XRL. My name is Rachel Gray. I work for HPP Systems as the Technical Services Manager, and I've also been a Pegasus specialist for over 10 years. So the aim of today really is for those people who maybe have XRL and don't utilise it very often, or have your standard reports made and don't tend to use it for creation of new reports. What we're going to do today is essentially start from the scratch in terms of what do we need to look for with data, what areas of XRL are easily used, and how simple it is to extract the data from the system. As always, we do have everyone on mute today. However, if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the question box on the GoToWebinar application, and I will answer those as soon as possible, and I can also answer any questions at the end of the webinar. So we will get started. So for most people that use the XRL application, as you know, it resides in Excel itself. Now, the tab that we use for that is called Info Query and Analysis, and it does require a specific logon for your access into the system. Now, what that login is doing is linking into the Opera data live. So it is a live stream of the information once that data has been pulled down and then refreshed as it's required. So the username and password is per individual. It is allocated, so if we have one user, it is just one username and password that can access XRL. Unfortunately, it's not concurrent. Now, within Excel, before we start to select the options that XRL has, the one thing I always think is a great idea to do is to firstly just have a think about exactly where the data is in Opera at the time and how you see it currently, because that is really beneficial when it comes to then understanding exactly where you need to extract the data within XRL. And an example of that is, let's say, for example, we just want a list of our accounts in the sales ledger. So as you know, in Opera, we would go into financials, we would go into sales processing, and we would see our list of accounts. Now, from there, if we then wish to see the individual transactions for that account, we can go onto our current balance, select OK, and it brings up a new screen, which is what we call the transaction screen, and that will show the transactions relevant for this customer. Now, a simple explanation of how XRL works is theoretically backwards in the way that you would have entered that information. So as an example, if I want just the account information for the sales ledger, I would use what we'll see as the accounts table. If I want to see transactions, I would use the transactions table. The transactions table will allow me to see the sales processing information. However, the accounts table would not allow me to see the transactions. And that's what I mean by working slightly the other way round. Always go for the lower level of information you're looking for, because then the higher levels are always available from those tables. Whereas if you go for the higher level, the transactions and drill downs aren't available from that area. So it's just a good way to have a look in Opera and firstly think about where is my information and how do I get it in Opera. So let's see that in action in XRL. So I'm going to open Excel and I've already logged on as my username. So what I have is the standard ribbon bar that's available for Excel. Now, this can be quite daunting because there are a lot of information, there's a lot of options on here. But on a day-to-day basis, really, what we're focusing on is the information in the cell area, because this is what drives the creation of the actual reports. Now, the main four of what everyone will be using today is detailed report, summary report, summary link, and reference link. And we're going to go through what each one of those does. Now, I'm going to select detailed report, and the first thing to do is select in your Excel sheet where you would like the report to start. So in case we want any menus or headers, I'm going to start slightly further down and then select my detailed report. Now what it does is automatically it knows that we're linking to Opera 3 or Opera 2. And then I have a list of the companies that I have available to me based on the access I've been given. So today we're just going to be using the demo data company Z. And then if I double click on the table line, I then have the list of all the modules that my system has available. And from there, we can then select the tables and access that we wish to see. So if we go into the sales option, within here again, a number of different tables that are available. But don't be too daunted by this because again, on a regular basis, you're probably going to be using only 2 or 3 of these. What I'm going to be looking at is the SN accounts table, which is actually the processing screen we saw in Pegasus earlier. And I'm also going to be looking at the ST transactions table. So that's the transaction screen we also saw when we went into Opera. If I select accounts and select OK, that then loads all of the fields within that data. And essentially I can pick and choose absolutely anything from this selection list to bring into my Excel sheet. So I'll name on the account, and if I double click that, you can see it automatically goes in the output area. I also want the name of the account, possibly the address line and the postcode. I may also want the region and territory that those accounts belong to. And then let's go for our current balance on the account. Now within this section, you will see little plus symbols, and what that allows us to do is gain additional access to tables that describe certain areas of what we're selecting. So a good example of this is if we pull through the region. If we look in our lookup, we can also have the description of that region, the type and the code. So it just gives us a little bit further analysis. But what this doesn't do, because we've gone in at the top level of the account, I have no options here to view any transactions. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select OK to that report. It then refreshes and outputs all of our data. So that is a straightaway list of all of our accounts and the current balances within them. Now, once it's in Excel, you can do whatever you wish to the report. So we could sort it, we can filter it, we can add additional equations and information in additional fields. So it's out there and it is no longer linked to Pegasus in that it can't affect any data within Opera. The only thing it will do is amend the report of which we can refresh it. If I wish to go back into the report, possibly we need to add some more fields or some more information. The one thing we need to do is go back to the first original field that the report was created. And from here, what you can see is a strange equation of sorts. What this is actually telling me is that the XRL report is derived from this field. So it's always this field we need to be careful of, not to edit, not to amend, because that's the link to the actual report. But if we just simply double click back into that field, the XRL report is reloaded and I can carry on editing and amending. So we might also want, if we scroll down, credit limit. We may also want order balance, and possibly if the account's on stop. So you can build and you can test and you can play with the reports as much as required in terms of extract a small portion, see how that looks, go back in and add further information. So again, what I'm going to do is select OK. Again, it will refresh just for a short period and the data will be exported. So it's a very quick and simple process rather than, running reports, exporting to Excel. If you do have the XRL function and you need quick lists of data or information, this is where XRL is absolutely fantastic, as well as the really detailed reports that we have from the management area as well. So that's a report based on our top level sales account. I'm going to create a new tab now, and I'm going to essentially create the same report. So I'm going to select a cell I wish to start and click Detailed Report. My product and my company ID are already selected, so I can double click on the table line, maximize sales, and this time I'm going to go for my ST transactions and select OK. Now, a big difference here, and this is again just an example of how we can drill into further information from the lower end of where the data sits, is we also have our little plus symbol against SN accounts. So that table we saw earlier is fully available to access from the sales transaction table. So it's always a good idea to exactly plan where you're wanting to retrieve data, because then you can start in a location where you can retrieve much more information. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the same type of report but based on transactions. So we might want the account code, yes. Now within the transactions table, we don't tend to have the account name, which is where we can maximize our SN accounts table and choose the name. Minimize again, because otherwise it's a very long list to scroll through, and we're back to the information available on the transaction element. So may also want the date of the transaction, the reference and customer reference, the type such as invoice, credit note, the value, VAT value, and balance. Double clicking, as you can see, also highlights them in green, so you can, when scrolling through, easily see which fields you've already got selected. And now I'm happy with that, I'm going to select OK. Again, as it's extracting the data out of Pegasus, it does just take a few short moments to extract that data, and here we have a full list. So this is now a list of all of the transactions physically in my sales ledger at this moment in time. I have no filters, I have no additional information. So this is again where the detailed report is very useful. And this is how a detailed report is used. So what a detailed report does is, based on the criteria you enter in XRL, it will output all information, all lines. There are no summaries or equations or anything included in here. So for example, Adams Light Engineering, as we can see, has a number of transactions. Based on my selection of the fields account, name, date, reference, customer reference, and also value, VAT value, and balance, which are unique to each line. Now, this is then where we can then choose what type of report we want to create. So what I'm going to do now is create the exact same report on another tab, but I'm actually going to use our summary report, and this is where the key difference is. So in sales, I do only have a shorter list of tables available because summary reports automatically think that we're looking for values, because what it's going to do, it's going to summarize values based on the information you output. So I'm going to choose our sales transactions again. And again, I'm going to choose account. I also want the name, the date, the reference, customer reference, type, value, VAT value, and balance. And the slight difference is that the values are highlighted in red, and you can see, very much like in XRL, it is stating that it is going to sum these values once the output is created. Now, when I select OK, what we're going to find is that it is the exact same report as our detailed report, because the information I've chosen to export is unique to each line. So what we can then start doing is slightly amending this to take out some of the information so we do truly have a total value, for example, per account. So let's do that now. Again, back into the first ever cell that we created for the report, double click will allow you to go back in. And what I'm actually going to do is remove some of the information that we requested. So I'm going to remove customer reference and date. So it's selecting and dragging back into the selection list. And as you can see, that does show it as green, as not in green anymore. And I'm going to select OK again. So that report will now automatically change to a much shorter report. So I now have, for Adams Light Engineering, for each type of transaction available, I have my value, VAT value, and balance. We could go one step further, back into the report, removing the type and selecting OK, and it summarises it even further. Now, if we go back to our sheet 4, where our detailed report was held, and do the same process, so let's double click on our first sheet, remove our date, reference, customer reference, and type, and select OK, we still get an individual line per transaction. So that's the key difference between a detailed and summary report. And again, just why, if we are creating a report, it's always a good just to take a moment to think about what information are we wanting to export. So the detailed and summary reports are the reports that's going to build you a report based on a lot of information. Now, what we've just done there is a very simple extraction of data. It's exported absolutely everything based on my criteria. But a great thing about XRL is then the ability to filter and strip out information based on certain criteria. So that's what we're going to do now. What I'm going to say is on my sheet 4, which is our detailed report, double click back on our account screen. I'm going to add and filter some more information. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put my date, reference and customer reference back in, but I'm not too worried about type. Now in my list, because I've now added and taken out information, the order is slightly wrong, and it's very simple to adjust this. All we need to do is we can select the field and drag and drop, or you can use our scroll bars here to move the data to a different position in the list. What we can also do is sort that data. So it might be, at the moment it automatically appears in alphabetical order based on my first field. I might want it based on the balance that's outstanding on that transaction. So to add and apply sorts to any data, we right-click in our output area and select sorting. From here, I'm going to select that I want to sort based on my balance. And at the moment, it's going to sort A to Z. So that should be lowest to highest. So select OK. Our sort column now highlights the data it's going to sort by, and we can select OK again. And apologies, that went highest to lowest. So we then have our data sorted. So rather than using the Excel sorts, based on the fact that this may get recalculated a number of times, we can add and apply the sorts into the data. Now, it may well be that actually we don't need to see any of these transactions that have a zero balance, so essentially have been paid or are not outstanding. So this is where we can then start adding our filters. So going back into our original cell and reopening the Excel report. So the filter area is held within our filter section, which is the very top area of the report. And to filter a field, it does not have to be within the actual report. So it can be a field that's not included in the output. But just for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight balance and drag and drop into the top area. And that's allowing me to apply a filter. Now, this does use Excel functions. So what I'm also going to say is that I only want to see information that's greater than 0. And select OK. And there we have our report completely changed and now showing only transactions with a balance greater than 0. So essentially what we've just done there is created a list based on all our accounts on what's outstanding. Any questions on that so far at all? Great, we'll continue on. So once we've got our data out, there are many other filters we may wish to select based on the account, based on the date, based on potentially invoice numbers. So again, all of these can be added because we can have as many filters as we wish in any report. But what I'm actually going to do is create them as a menu structure. So this is why I've left our small gap up at the top. And what I'm going to say is I would like to manually type in account. And just put a filter in that says all. Now that's not doing anything at the moment, but what I'm going to do is link that into XRL so we can choose accounts we wish to see very easily. So now I've created that, so what I'm going to do is double click back on our field and I'm going to drag account up as a filter. But rather than, which you can do, choosing the ellipses and selecting the account you wish to filter by, I'm going to point this to a physical cell on my sheet. So, and with the dollar signs, it's purely fixed to my cell B1 and select OK. Now that should make no difference at all to my report because at the moment my filter is all. However, now I've linked that, I can double click on that field without having to go into the Excel report itself and choose an account I wish to run. Once I've selected, within Recalculate, I'm going to ask to recalculate our worksheet, and based on that information, it has now refreshed the data. So the Recalculate button, based on any changes you make to any menus, is what will then bring that data through back from Opera. So very quick, very easy functions. We could also add a date filter. I'm just using 2017 with demo data just to be assured that I do have some information. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into our report and I'm going to pull through date as a filter. Select my date from field I've just populated, so B2. Select my cursor into the filter to field and then highlight the B3 cell so we can automatically see the fields it's pointing to and also the dates that it's going to pick up. And again, once I'm happy with that, I'm going to select OK. So for this customer, at the moment, there are no transactions for that date. So let's go back and double click our Select All on our filter and recalculate the worksheet. So now I do have data automatically. So building these small menus into your reports means that you don't always have to go into the report to change any information. You can manually change these dates as you wish, and you can also double click on the account, see a full list of all the available options and choose that within the report. So it makes them more flexible, makes them more user-friendly for people that maybe aren't used to creating XRL reports themselves. Now those reports, those menus, those filters are all available on every single report and field you create. So the flexibility and the power of extracting information is vast within the XRL module, and hopefully you're all starting to see that. So now what we're going to do is go a little bit further. And I'm going to create a brand new sheet. And what I'm wanting to do potentially is create myself almost a debtors report in Excel. So the first thing I'm going to want, I imagine, is a date from and a date to. I may also want the account, but what I'm going to do is export a list of all the accounts. So starting from a cell, I'm going to choose a detailed report. In my company Z and on the table, I'm going to select the sales ledger. And I'm going to go into transactions. In fact, sorry, no, accounts. And I'm just going to purely pull through the account and the name and select OK. So now I now have a very quick list of all the accounts within the system. Now what I'm then going to do is think about, well, how would I like this formatted? So I'm going to create some columns. From January to December, and above those I'm going to put the dates of which these are relevant for. And once I've entered a couple of those information, we can just drag it across and it will populate that to detail for each month. So now I have dates above them. Now this is where we then start to think about our reference and summary links. So a reference link and a summary link is the output of data based on information already in your report. A reference link looks to export text and a summary link looks to export values. So what I'm going to look for are summary links. And I'm going to select summary link in the cell I first wish the link to appear, so the information to appear. Now what a summary link doesn't do, there are no headers, there are no totals, there are no column names. It is purely a field of information. So if I select summary link, and again, I'm happy with my company Z, And on my table, under sales, I'm going to choose transactions again. And this time, I want the balance, or the value actually, because what we'll do is we'll create a report based on the invoice values per month per customer. So then what we need to do is apply our filters to the value. So as I said before, the filters we drag to the top do not have to be included in the output. So I'm going to drag account up to the top, and I'm going to choose the first row where my account appears. So as you can see, we're fixing column A because we have a dollar in front of A, and then row 7 is not fixed, so that is available to change as it goes down. What I'm then going to do is drag date up to the top and choose our first date, click into the filter 2 and choose our second date. So we can check that we're correct with the dates that it's pulling through and select OK. If we double click back in there again, just to confirm we're happy, the account is ADA001, the dates are to those dates. What we can then do is, rather than creating that for every single field, if we hover over the bottom right hand corner and drag that field across, and we can also double click that to go down, as you can see, there is no refresh on those fields because we'd need to recalculate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recalculate the range that's highlighted currently. Now this is a lot more information than what we have been pulling through, so I do need to allow it to take a moment just to recreate that data, but automatically straight away there you can see a very detailed report based on everything that we have currently as a value. Now what we can do in here is we can create our own totals just using our sum functions within Excel itself. And again, drag those across, and we can start to format this so we can make the columns and the headers in different fonts just to ensure that that is all available. And if you don't wish to see these dates, we could highlight them and hide so we don't actually see that information all of the time. So just planning out what we want to see has allowed us to get a very detailed report in there. Has anybody got any questions on that element at all? Okay. Another very useful option for our reference and summary links is what we're going to look at next. So I'm going to create a brand new sheet. This time what I'm going to do is first actually think about my menu structure. What am I going to want to filter and potentially change on this report? Now, all through the reports we've created so far, I've left the company ID as Z. But as I'm sure most of you know, many people have multiple companies within their Opera system. And one report may not be restricted just to that one company. So I want to actually choose the company that I'm working on based on my menu. I may also want dates. I may also want accounts. So this is all free text. There's no links to Excel currently. And then I'm going to choose the field I wish to start my report on. So back onto our Info Query and Analysis tab. What I'm actually going to choose first is a summary report. And this time, very much like we've just seen where we can point our data to an Excel field, rather than choosing my company, I'm going to ask it to point at this cell. So what quickly becomes purely locked to one report without having to go into the XRL report and change the company, I can now do that on that front screen. I want to look at its table. And again, what I'm going to do is pick on the sales ledger because I know it's a module that many people use. And I'm going to pull through transactions. So I'm then going to choose my account. my account name, the date of my transaction, the reference, customer reference. Possibly don't need type, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter that to say it's just invoices I wish to pull through. My value, VAT value, and balance. And I've just double clicked on that too many times, so if you've done that, you can just drag and drop that field back in. And then also going to filter it by date, selecting my two fields. And just in case I want to filter by account, I'm going to pull account up to the top as well and highlight the field and select OK. So that is now again a very quick report based on summary links of the information that I wish to pull through. Now, the reason why I've actually told it just to purely focus on invoices is because what we can then do is think about additional modules within the system. So I know that from my sales order processing screen, when I create orders, progress them through delivery and then invoice, the invoice number is generated from the sales order processing module. So that is what generates this reference here, my INV 01976 and down. Now, not every single sales ledger invoice comes from sales order processing, so this isn't going to be valid for every single line, but potentially what I would like to do is pull through the order number or the document number that was originally created for that invoice from my sales order processing module, not my sales ledger. So I'm going to create myself a new column. And a second as well for my order number and document number. So this is where what we're now going to use is our reference link. And just remembering, summary links are for values and reference links are for text. Let's choose our first column and choose our reference link. Now, because I've linked my original report to my company Z cell, we need to ensure we do this for this as well, because if we changed one, we need to make sure it changes any equations and calculations we've added into the system. And this time I'm going to choose table. And instead of the sales ledger, I'm going to choose invoicing and SOP. Now, the two main tables you are probably going to use in invoicing and SOP is IHEAD headers, which is your original header field when you're entering your delivery number, references and dates. There's also a transaction table. But what you'll see is that isn't available in this list because the transaction table is a value-based table, not a text-based table. So I'm going to select IHEAD and select OK. So I'm then going to say, scrolling down, to find the information I wish to have, I'm going to choose my sales order and I'm going to choose my document number. So I'm going to have two columns created from this equation, and it's going to be based on the account in my first row, but also if we scroll down, because we need to choose something that's unique to ensure this is pulled through correctly, I'm going to choose my invoice number based on my reference field and select OK. So we can see on here, possibly there was no order number created, but we do have a document number. So highlighting the first cell, because that is again where our equation is held, and even highlighting it actually shows you where all the filters and all the links are. I'm going to hover over my bottom right hand corner and double click down. If I then recalculate my entire worksheet, because you don't just have to recalculate a range, again, it'll just take a moment to populate the information, but as it extracts all the detail, we can instantly see that starts to pull through the information. And that's the power of the reference and summary links. It's not just for grabbing data from the same module. We can then start looking at the relationships between different modules and different fields based on a unique factor in the information we've pulled through. Does anybody have any questions on that at all? Great. So again, if you do have any questions, feel free to use our questions area and I will answer them straight away. So hopefully everyone can see there the power of XRL and the easy ability to pull through simple information. Now, we can also start looking at other values, other information, other modules. So we have obviously all the stock potential reports that we have, our purchase ledger potentials, and so the vast information available to extract, just really based on having that quick think about where we want to grab the data, how we want to filter it, and then choosing the correct format between those 4 reports we've detailed, works brilliantly for extracting information. Now, what many people do when it comes to management reports is where we have our menus here for our individual sheet, they can be created as their own sheet to have a menu structure for an entire workbook based on all of the different reports that you may hold in there. So then we can start thinking about how to structure, how to layer, and how to create all of the reports. Oh, hi, Sue. Yes, you just asked a question with regards to CIS. So the exact same principles here will work with CIS. Now, the tables are not going to be the same, but the structure for detailed summary links and reference links, how to filter, how to create menus is exactly the same, whether you're linking with XRL in Opera or XRL in CIS. So if there are any questions with regards to which tables, and this is for everybody, if you're stuck on what table to actually use, trying to figure out how to pull through the data, feel free to give the help desk a call. We will always point you in the right direction of which table to use to grab information. So just as a reminder before we leave then, so our detailed report will extract information every single line regardless of the information you've pulled through. Our summary report will summarise the information and the values in the value fields based on the information we've exported. And our reference and summary links are used to pull individual elements of information based on criteria you've already built within the system. Hi, Matt. Great question. So a question Matt has actually just raised is with regards to, is there an easy way of pulling data from both the analysis and the historical sales ledger at once? Now, unfortunately, what I'll show you, and again, this will be beneficial for everybody, is that if we have a look at our data structures, and this is also why there is a difference between current period transactions and historical transactions. And this is relevant for both the sales and the purchase ledgers. We have an SA analysis table, and we also have our history table, SH. So when we run a period end in the sales and purchase ledger, all the data for the current period gets moved into our history table. Any data that's then in the current period, so hasn't been period ended, resides within the analysis table. So extracting information can be done side by side potentially with 2 different reports, but combining the 2 reports is very difficult because it's actually what you would want is a detailed report from both tables, and you can only focus a detailed or a summary report on one table at a time. So I would potentially suggest something along the lines of, if we pull through our sales analysis table, there doesn't really need to be many filters or structures on here because it is purely only data that has not been period ended. And select OK. So we now have a very quick report of all the transactions that are essentially this period. So as you can see, my current period is January 2018 in the demonstration data. What you could then do is, as you have then a list here, at the side of this report, we could create a second report. From sales history, and again, account, name, date, reference, and if we scroll down, we can pull through the value. Now that report based on history will be all transactions. So I would also recommend, depending on if you're wanting to run it through the past 3 months, the past 9 months, that we do add a date filter up into the top and choose our dates. So hopefully, Matt, that is answering a little bit of a question in terms of getting that data into the same value. Has anybody got any other questions at all? Great. Well, that really concludes our webinar. Like I say, it was based really to ensure that everybody has the fundamentals on how to start creating and extracting information from Excel, from XRL with Opera. So I do hope that everybody has enjoyed today and been able to generate some information. Just a quick question from John there is, when is the cube data appropriate? It's really more for analysis. So just a quick example there, John. If we choose cube analysis, we can then choose our table exactly like we have been doing and choose our account reference. What it does is it analyzes the information based on what we've requested. We can build a chart based on the requested information, and you can see the sums and averages. So on the options, what we can then start to do is, based on the information we've selected, start to say, do we want to measure or additional slices? So I would possibly say on the account, I would want a row, and then automatically populates that information based on a row by row basis. So what you're not really getting is a populated Excel report, but you do have then the option to manipulate the data further in a cube and use it for analysis and also creating charts as well. So as you can see there, we have a quick chart from Adams Light Engineering based on the value, what the average was, and the balances. And there is a vast more options available within XRL. It can be used for huge reports, but it does take a much longer session to start to look at those things. So if anybody is interested in that, please let us know, and we can look to arrange days and times potentially based on your requirements for XRL reports. Now there's one very last thing that's slightly different to how we work in XRL. And that's based on the principle that the data we pull down does not affect Opera. However, there is one element that we can actually update Opera instead, and that's using our data send. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a detailed report. And this time I'm going to base it on stock. And I have names, which is my main screen. I have transactions, which are the transactions. We also then have stock per warehouse as well. So I'm going to pull through my stock reference and my description. And I'm also going to pull through my cost price. And if we scroll down, I'm going to choose what my current in-stock quantity is and select OK. Now that again, a very quick and simple report based on stock levels. However, what you can use XRL for is to almost stock take. So if we then printed this sheet out, gave it to our employees to say, please go enter and count the stock. What we can then do is say, right then, what are my stock counts? So let's say we have 187,000 of that. We do in fact have 160 of that value. We may have a few more of our Carmat 122. So we have our stock count. What we then need to do is work out the difference with just a simple Excel equation tell us what the difference is. And with XRL, what you will find, if you are creating Excel equations, they do go on the same rules, is that until you recalculate, the fields don't automatically calculate the information. So the auto calculate is actually stopped. And what we'll do is let's actually say that on here we do only have 180. And you can double click in the cell, or we could select recalculate worksheet. So just using those three elements there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a data send. And that's using our option at the top. So we do have a number of options available to us on data send. The majority, well, the two used really are our stock data send and also for updating budgets within the nominal ledger. Now, I'm not going to go through budgets today because it is very dependent on how you structure your nominal, how your budgets are imported. But stock is very useful for a number of people that maybe don't have a stock take module or want a quick and easy option to update our stock. Now, what the data send is going to do is actually post adjustments into the stock module based on our differences. So I'm happy with my product and company Z, exactly like we would do to create a new item. We then want to choose our definition. So our definition is what process do we want to write back into Opera. So as you can see, we have a number of different options based on the nominal budgets, and then we just have our update stock. They're going to ask me for an error cell. So this means if there's any problems with writing this data, where would you like me to tell you about it? So I'm going to choose an individual cell so I can read the information if there is a problem. And I'm going to do the same for a comment cell as well. Now, a matrix send is very much for budgets, which we can cover at a different date if people are interested. But that's about having multiple rows and multiple columns analysed. We're just analysing one column in terms of what we want the difference to be. And is it skipping blanks? So we have a number of blank lines here. Do we ignore them? Yes, we do in most cases. So our stock reference, very much like when we were selecting filters based on information on an Excel sheet, that's exactly what we're going to do here. So highlighting the stock reference line and selecting our first stock item. Warehouse, I only want it to go to one warehouse, so I can physically choose that rather than having that available in my sheet. What's my quantity? So what am I amending? So I'm going to choose my difference. The date of the posting, I'm going to choose as today. Do I have a reference? Yes. Again, I'm going to enter that manually. And what is the cost price? So that's why we've also pulled out the cost price as well to ensure we can select that and the cost price is updated. Once you've populated that information, let's select OK. Now it's going to tell me we've got errors because we have a number of lines that don't have any information. So as you can see, quantity field is mandatory. So if we just cancel our screen and let's remove the information that we don't need. And let's amend that again. So our data send, again, definition. So what are we actually choosing to update? Where would we like the information based on if there is a problem? Are we skipping blanks? Yes, we are. And then we're choosing our information to update. So now it recognises there are no errors. It's confirming. Are you sure you do want to apply this process? Because what this is going to do is it is going to write the data into Opera. Yes, I am. So now we have one error. And it doesn't like the quantity 0. So of course, if we have a line that we don't truly need to stock take, let's try that again. So I'm going to cancel out and just run that again. So it is very, very good at identifying if there is a problem before it tries to write the data in. And it's now telling us that we've had our records transferred. So if we go into our Opera module, into our stock processing, view our main warehouse, we now see that we've got our adjustment, and we had 2 of these items in here, so we've got 2 adjustments processed. So automatically, very easily and very quickly, we can see our stock take adjustments that have been applied. So just a very simple process to ensure that we're not having to manually enter those if we've already had them counted in an Excel sheet. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I do hope everybody's enjoyed it. Has anybody got any other questions at all? Great. Well, thank you ever so much, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Any feedback is greatly appreciated, and thank you for those that always do. And if there is any further requirements, please let me know. Thank you very much.